ABC 15's Nicole Grigg is live in Phoenix with calls for the governor to listen to educators. Nicole?
Hi, Steve. And we're a day away from the governor expected to make that announcement on schools. The question is he going to follow the calls from educators and listen to them as they're calling for a plan and not a date?
Hi, I'm Governor Doug Ducey.
And I'm Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kathy Hoffman.
We saw these two powerful political figures side by side in mid-March.
The health and safety of all our students is our top priority.
He's a Republican, she's a Democrat. One with a background in business, the other a former speech therapist in public schools. They sat together for this PSA in March.
Because of that, we are announcing a statewide closure of all Arizona schools.
Days after announcing in a YouTube video schools would be closed, we saw them together again days later, handing out lunches and praising each other that same day.
And I want to say a special thank you to Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kathy Hoffman.
But now pressure is mounting for a decision on reopening schools in the quest to open based on criteria, not a date.
It's been a date-driven process, but really, I think it should be a performance-driven process.
This week, Will Humble, the state's former director of public health, putting out a blog suggesting specific criteria.
For example, we could say that we need to see a 30-day downward trend in community new cases. That would be the first criteria. The second thing you would need to meet is to have a 5% positive rate on samples going into the laboratory or lower.
He's not the only one calling for data-based decisions. Arizona School Board Association writing a letter to Governor Ducey, reminding him that schools should not be open until phase 2 of the White House gating criteria.
But the number one thing to understand is school boards across the state are struggling with the appropriate point to put students back in a classroom.
And now another sign that Superintendent Hoffman thinks more needs to be done. A second letter publicly calling for more aggressive action, this time insisting also that the decision to reopen schools should be based on metrics and data, not a date on the calendar.
This is a political issue on all sides. It's fallen out that way. It shouldn't be, but it is. We need policy leadership from the public health arm of state government.
Glenn Hammer with the Chamber of Commerce, a strong ally to the governor. We asked him if he thinks the governor will listen to the educators and those calling for more than a date.
The relationship that Governor Ducey and Superintendent Hoffman, a Republican and Democrat, have had throughout this pandemic has been a model of bipartisan cooperation. And my strong hope is that that partnership continues.
And one thing to question, how can the governor consider reopening based on a date? As we're learning, one of the largest labs in the state has a backlog of 62,000 tests. We asked Maricopa County's health department if that's a concern.
I can't speak to the backlog at the labs, but what I can tell you is there's plenty of evidence that tells us that it's very important to have a rapid turnaround time between when people get tested and when those tests come back to public health.
And the county agrees decisions to reopen should be based on criteria.
I definitely support that a specific date is not what's important. What's important is looking at local transmission of COVID-19 in the community.
The governor's office says they're working with Superintendent Hoffman's office as well as superintendents across the state, and their goal is to give them guidance to make data-informed decisions. Reporting live in Phoenix, Nicole Grigg, ABC 15, Arizona.